Good day, folks. Everything new under the sun. Well, the red heifers, a little bit of an update here and a timeline, which could be very interesting. Now, the timeline points to the red heifer sacrifice in the year 2024, next year. We're going to take a look at that. Now, what you're looking at is the timeline of the return of the Lord. And if you've watched some of the previous videos where I was showing the timeline, it could be that the end of 6,000 years of man is indeed the year 2030, and there's many reasons for that, and I don't know the exact date and time. Nobody does, but we're looking at prophetic events and looking at what's happening and trying to decipher, and we're looking up in an expectant way for the return of our Lord Jesus Christ and the rapture of the church. Now, I believe the rapture of the church happens at the midpoint of the 7-year period. Why? Because the abomination of desolation appears to occur at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation spoken of in Daniel. And I believe before that is the wrath of man on mankind, basically the repercussions for our own sin. It's all our own doing the first 3.5 years, so that includes Revelation chapter 6, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse riding the first 3.5 years. Then the Antichrist figure, who has been around and hasn't revealed himself as an Antichrist figure or an evil figure or someone who wants to be God, will reveal himself as the Antichrist because he will want to be God and he will declare himself as God when he causes the abomination of desolation, sits on the throne in the third temple. All of that happens at the midpoint of the 7-year period. And so as soon as that happens, then the wrath of God falls because that's God's ultimate red line. The devil sitting on causing the abomination of desolation in the third temple. The rapture occurs, and then the wrath of God. So we won't be here around for the wrath of God, but we're going to be here for a lot of fireworks, a lot of world-ending, incredible events that are spoken of in the Bible. Now, the year 2028, which is what you see there, is the end of 80 years. And it says that man is given 70, but if by reason of strength, 80 years on this earth. And Israel has been a nation will have been a nation for 80 years as of the year 2028. So that's an interesting time period, and it's really a close of a period for the Jewish people, I believe, and really for us as well. So sometime in there, I believe, is the end of 6,000 years of man, and prior to that is the rapture of the church. Now, to get to the red heifers and the timeline that the red heifers now indicate, if you've been watching over the years, you'll know that there are red heifers in Israel right now, and they need to be 3 years old. So we're going to take a look at this article here. This is from CBN.com. And it says a lot of interesting things. And we're going to take a look at Passover and Shavuot in the year 2024 because there's indications there that there's a timeline where the heifers, the red heifers, are of age to where they can be sacrificed. And then ultimately the ashes of the red heifer are what then allow the cleansing of the third temple, the temple implements. They require them before they can be used in the third temple sacrifices specifically. And of course, we know that the Antichrist at one point in Daniel chapter 9 causes the sacrifices to cease as he sits on the throne in the third temple. And we're gonna take a look at Daniel chapter 9 there. But it says, last September, 5 red heifers arrived in Israel amid great fanfare because some Jews and Gentiles believe red heifers are a key element to the leading to the building of the third Jewish temple. And we don't believe it. The Jews certainly don't just believe it. They know it to be true. It's a requirement. And it's spoken of in Numbers 19. It's one of the things they're following. Now, the Christians, if you're a Christian, you know that the Jews don't need a third temple. Jesus Christ already came, and he lives within us now. We are the temple of Christ. But the Jews still believe that. They still believe there's some things to happen there. They're still waiting for the Messiah. And that's why they're duped by the Antichrist, who comes and tricks them for a period of 3.5 years, the first part of the tribulation. And then when he sits on the throne in the third temple, declaring himself to be God, that's when they say blasphemy. And they recognize that, in fact, the Antichrist that they thought was their Messiah is not the Messiah, and they will turn to God at that point in time. So the heifers are now in a secure, undisclosed location in Israel. Plans include moving them sometime soon to a visitor center in Shiloh, where the tabernacle of the Lord once stood for nearly 400 years. So they're there. They're aging. They're growing up right now. They have to be 3 years old. They're monitoring them closely because they can't have anything other than red hair on them. So they're going to be inspected closely. Now, the book of Numbers explains that the ashes of the red heifer are used to purify priests for their service. Now, the question is, are there priests? And we will answer that shortly. Numbers 19, however, says, Now the Lord spake to Moses and Aaron, saying, This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord hath commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect, and on which a yoke has never come. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest, that he may take it outside the camp. It shall be slaughtered before them. It shall be burned for the water of purification. It is purifying from sin. So this is a requirement before they really do any third temple duties. Before they can do anything in a third temple, they need these ashes of the red heifer. They don't have them. Now, one possibility is that they could find them, like the copper scrolls, in some cave somewhere on a cliff, and find some red heifer ashes from 2,000 years ago. That hasn't happened yet, or at least we don't know that it's happened. So most Jews are still waiting for these pure, no defect red heifers to be able to produce those ashes that they believe they require for purification. Now, of course, we're purified by the blood of Jesus, but they don't, of course, believe that at this point. The red heifers now that are in Israel, as we speak, are now between 1.5 to 2 years old. To replicate the ceremony mentioned in the Bible, they need to be at least 3 years old, and they cannot have a blemish or anything that would disqualify them, even one white or black hair. So the requirement is over the next year or so, as they inspect them, they can't grow any non-red hairs effectively. The ceremony of the red heifers needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have overlooked directly where the temple stood. So the Temple Mount proper, as they believe now, the land directly east of the Temple Mount, purchased 12 years ago, meets those standards. So this guy, Rabbi Yitzhak Mamo, actually bought the land that is apparently suitable for this purpose across from the Temple Mount. Concerning the specifics of the land, he told CBN News it had to be exactly at the front of the place that the priest that made the ceremony can see the Holy of Holy place, the Holy of Holies. So the priest has to be able to see it from the hill, and that's a suitable location for the sacrificing of and the burning of this red heifer. Rabbi Memo added, and we hope that in 1.5 years from today, we can make here in this area the ceremony of the red heifer actually will be the first step to the temple. The temple is a big deal because prophetically it gives us a milestone from which we can count backwards and understand the timeline of the return of the Lord, and potentially when the 7-year period starts, which I think is very close, but we don't know exactly when that will start. He says the ceremony needs priests who have not been defiled by touching the dead. The Temple Institute, now you've heard me speak of the Temple Institute, you can go to templeinstitute.org. They have been creating all the implements, all the tools, all the garments for the priests, the Levitical priests. They've also been looking for and training the priests. They know the bloodline of the Levites. They've been training them. They have 9 pure priests at this point. And there was a bunch of requirements, and they met them all. They weren't born in a hospital. They were born at home specifically, to keep them pure. They've never went to a cemetery in their life, as their parents knew from when they were a baby that they may have that chance to be a priest. And they believe that they are pure, and they are waiting. So we have the red heifer. We have the land. We have everything already. We just need to wait another 1.5 years. So that's interesting, right? So the time is close. Now, the date of this is March 17, 23. You can see there. So a year and a half. So what exact date range are they looking at? We're going to take a look at that. So we believe it's very likely that the ceremony would happen somewhere in the area of Passover 2024, next year. Time is getting close, folks. Out to the possibility of Shavuot 2024. Somewhere in that timeline, the cows would be old enough, so that's 3 years old, and it would be the proper timeline for the ceremony. So there's a window of opportunity, a window of time, when the red heifers that they have in Israel will be ready, and when it's proper to burn them for the ashes, and in the correct location. They have all the pieces. Now there's a specific window of time that they're waiting on. So between Passover and Shavuot 2024, when is that, you ask? Well, Passover, and this is from Shabbat.org, 2024 Passover happens April 22nd to 23rd, 22nd to 30th. So April, and then Shavuot 2024 is June 11th. So anywhere between April next year and June next year, mid-June next year, on the Gregorian, the calendar that you and I go by, this is the window of time when these red heifers could be burned to produce the ashes. Now, if they have a blemish, they will be discounted. They will not be able to burn them. If there is one that is pure according to whatever their requirements are, basically no blemishes, no black hair on them, then they have to be available and of age during this particular period. So there's a window of opportunity. There's a shelf life for these red heifers, and it's very specific. If it doesn't happen within this time, those red heifers are then too old, and they have to find new red heifers. So the time is short, and I haven't heard that there's more red heifers. There may be more red heifers in the wings, but I haven't heard of any more than these particular, 4 or 5 of them that are in Israel right now. So very specific timeline and area where we're looking at now. So somewhere in that timeline, they say the cows will be old enough, and it would be the proper timeline. Again, outside of that, those red heifers are too old at that point. They can't use them. So this has to be a go next year, or they have to find red heifers. New red heifers, sorry. Stinson believes this would be the first possibility for such a ceremony in 2,000 years, and that the process towards building a third temple began when the Jewish people started their return to the Promised Land from the 4 corners, culminating with Israel becoming a nation. Of course, that happened in 1948. They turned 70 years old as a nation in the year 2018. They turned 80 years in 2028, 80 years old. And I think it's Psalm 90, correct me if I'm wrong, I need to look that up, but where it says man is given 70 years, but if by reason of strength, 80 years. And what does that mean? Man is given 70 years, but if by reason of strength, and maybe that supernatural strength from the Lord, 80 or 80 years. So the time is marching on, and we're running out of time basically for Israel as a nation, according to that image and that verse there. So it says in 1948, in one day they were reborn as a nation, and that was a miraculous event that occurred. Stinson maintains that the temple is meant to be a house of prayer for all nations. Now this is significant because we know the Antichrist will attempt to make a one world religion. Likely they will join or fuse the 3 monotheistic religions for those of each religion that are willing to bow and be coerced into this. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the 3 monotheistic religions. And so this temple is going to be sold as a temple for everybody. And everybody will be going to Jerusalem to worship, the God that they worship there, not the God of the Bible, but this house of prayer for all nations. It's going to be the God that they come up with. In the Bible it says when Solomon built the first temple, he said, this is a house of worship for all nations. Now it will be, in the millennial reign of Christ, it will be a house of worship for all nations, and all nations will march up there, and they will worship the true God. But this first one created by the Antichrist to bring the world together is not. It says, and that's what the temple is. And I think a lot of people think it's just a Jewish temple, but it's not true. It's for all nations. Stinson told CBN they plan to invite everyone to the red heifer ceremony that may take place during Passover 2024. So when's Passover 2024? April 30th. So folks, we are 12 months away from this red heifer and the burning of it and the ashes, which then allow the next step, the temple priest to be purified, to move into and start the sacrifices in the third temple. Now, Daniel chapter 9. So this is Daniel chapter 9. We go to the bottom of this. Is King James Version, BibleGateway.com. And this is a vision given to Daniel. And 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish a transgression, to make an end of the sins, and to make reconciliation for the iniquity. Now this is Jesus Christ dying on a cross, providing reconciliation for sin, and to bring everlasting righteousness. That's what Jesus Christ did on the cross. And to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. The street shall be rebuilt, even in troublesome times. And after 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off. This is Jesus Christ, being cut off, being put on the cross to die and rise again for our sins, but not for himself. So this is speaking specifically of Jesus. He doesn't die because of himself, because of something he did. He dies for you and I. So, but not for himself. And now the people of the prince that shall come, the people of the Antichrist, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the wars, desolations are determined. Now, verse 27 is where it gets into future events. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So this is the last 7 years of that full and complete time of the Jews. He shall confirm a covenant with for 1 week. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now that means that if some person stops the sacrifice, that means the sacrifices must have started. So the idea is at the beginning of the 7-year period, there will be wars, there will be famine, there will be all sorts of trouble. The Antichrist will come in. He will say, peace, peace. I'm going to make peace in the world. I'm going to feed everybody. And to ensure peace, as a covenant of peace, if you will, I'm going to allow the Jews to rebuild their third temple, and we're going to have a period of 7 years where there's a truce. There's no more war for 7 years, maybe so the United Nations can figure out a plan so that everybody can live in peace and security. It goes on, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that shall be poured upon the desolate. So he causes the sacrifices to cease. And this goes on to the verses when he sits on the throne in the third temple, causes the abomination of desolation. And that's really the trigger point for the wrath of God. So we're back to this timeline of the return of the Lord based on working backwards, working forwards and then backwards. Forwards from the sacrifice or the burning of the red heifers for the ashes to purify the Levitical priests and all the implements for use in the third temple. And once they have that, then we know, that the third temple is near. How much closer then is the start of the 7-year period? Because I think when the Antichrist comes into power, there's going to be great war upon the earth, and he will say, to allow for peace in the world, we're going to allow the Jews to rebuild the third temple, and we're going to, maybe the Jews are going to give up a bunch of land or give up some other concession to Iran or to the Palestinians or whatever it may be. But that's kind of the carrot on the end of the stick for the Jews to rebuild their third temple. And the world government is going to come together and say all the nations of the world can now worship there. And the Antichrist will deal with that for about 3.5 years, and then he will cause the sacrifices to cease. and then he will say, I want to be God, and he will attempt to sit on the throne in the third temple. That is the abomination of desolation. That is God's red line, and he will declare himself to be God, and that's exactly when the Jews are snapped out of their confusion of who the Messiah is, because they think he's the Messiah because he allows them to build their third temple. But why would they need a temple if the Messiah was actually on earth? It doesn't make any sense to me, but there you go. But they will snap out of that, and they will call on God at that point, and then the wrath of God will come down on the earth. And this is all part of this 7-year period, culminating at the midpoint by the wrath of God starting, and the Christians, those who are of the faith prior to that, will be raptured. We're going to be taken out. We're not going to be here for the wrath of God that is to come. Read Revelation chapter 6. You'll see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which I believe ride during the first 3.5 years. I could be wrong. Maybe they start even before that, and kind of set up the space where the Antichrist can come to power and can then have the opportunity to create a fake peace deal for a 7-year period. But you read through that, and after verse, I think, 10 or 12, you have the wrath of God falling, and it's at that point, after the 4 horsemen ride, but before the wrath of God, that the Christians are taken out. And we get to go up to the mezzanine, as Chuck Missler used to say, and watch the wrath of God from the sidelines that's happening all on the earth and all the things that are happening there. So I will leave there, guys. Thanks for watching a Red Heifer update for you today. Pretty exciting. We now have a timeline that we can look at, and we can compare and contrast and see if this gives us any indication of the third temple. And I suspect over the next couple of months, we will have confirmation, and we will have maybe more details of the third temple. Certainly the wars, rumors of wars are building. That's all known. We know that all that's going to happen, so there's hardly any point discussing it, but it is escalating very rapidly. And I think the world will get to a point of nuclear war just prior to the Antichrist coming to power and saying, you know what, I'm going to stop this madness, stop nuclear war. And all the people will accept him and will think he's the Messiah of a sort, and will accept the mark of the beast because he stops nuclear war. He puts an end to it. He creates a fake peace deal for 7 years. So this is all basically what the Bible describes happening in the last days from my understanding of it. So thanks for watching, folks. I'll leave it there. We will see you in the next video.